Started. I am super excited about this roundtable today. We're going to be talking about um, attributes, traits, different things like that. And I know that this is something that we've been kind of working on as a team to kind of identify you know really successful attributes, traits for recruiters, and what kind of identifying what makes recruiters successful. What are the things that makes recruiters successful? And so I don't know if everyone received it, but I put together like an updated agenda, and I kind of broke it down instead of having just a bunch of um, you know traits, characteristics. I kind of broke it down into four sections. And then I'm not going to step on any of Dave Whitty next week is going to kind of be somewhat in line with this. He's going to do a roundtable next week on goals, how to take your goals that you have for 2026 and breaking them down, keeping the end goal in mind, but then breaking them down into smaller goals, your daily, weekly, monthly goals to, put together some really good action plans. So he's going to do that next week. Um, and I'm not going to step on any of Dave's touchdown calls because I know he's going to go into a lot of like Singetti type of quotes and different mindsets that Singetti has, and I think he's going to actually adopt it throughout the year. So I'm not going to. When I was pulling out quotes, and that was the first thing my mind went was like, all right, what does he say? What does he say to his team? And so I didn't include any of those quotes because I know Dave's going to include a lot of them next week. But in saying that, I do know with talking with Dave and not knowing anything about the Indiana football program, talking with Dave and others, I quickly realized that quite a bit of what Signetti coaches on is mindset. Quite a bit of what he coaches on is, getting in the right mindset. And, IU fans, of course, are going to know that way more than I. But I think this will resonate with a lot of people that kind of follow Indiana football because it's like when you look at Indiana football, it's like, I don't get the numbers wrong, but most of these schools have 50, 60 4-star, 5-star athletes, and IU had what, under 10? And so if they have, less high profiled athletes, but yet they're doing really, really well, there has to be a reason. And I think a lot of it comes down to mindset and how they're being coached and how they're, being taught to kind of think about the process and still have enough athletic skill. But I think mindset comes a lot into it. So what I did here is I put some different kind of quotes I thought were really good. I'm not going to read down all of them, but these are all quotes on mindset, and I, really believe in this pretty darn strongly. And I think these are some quotes that I've seen before, some new ones that I hadn't seen before when I was researching it, and I really like a lot of these quotes. It just talks about how important mindset is, how important attitude is, how you can make significant changes in your production and um, just your performance by simply changing just habits, simply changing mindset on things by just doing some of these things that we're talking about. Because I know, like, I get asked a lot, I get asked a lot, like, what's the secret sauce? What do you do differently that, allows you to be successful? And like one thing that we all have at our resource, and one thing that we all have is we all have the same awesome tools, the same awesome training. What myself and other higher producers have been able to do, everyone has the access to do here. Everyone has the ability to do here, and and there's so many great resources and training tools that we have, and the great experienced management team that can turn anyone into a really high successful high producing recruiter. But for me, the secret sauce for me has always been this: the mindset, the mentality, these attributes, and these um just things that we're looking at here. This is the secret sauce for me. These are things that come easy to me, and then other things that over the years that through training that I've had to learn how to get better on a few of these things that I realized that I was weak in, that I had to work on and get better. And even going down this list this week when I was kind of putting this together, I looked at a lot of this and I'm like, oh, I need to get better at X, Y, and Z. So what I'm going to be, presenting is what I'm going to be doing myself. One of the things that I presented that I thought was really important is the things that you're really strong in, the attributes, the traits that you're really strong in. not only should you embrace those, but you should also then, you know, play the, pay it forward. You should be able to help, if you know someone that may struggle in a certain area and you're strong in that area, pay it forward, help them, teach them, to teach them some of your tricks. How are you better in this certain thing? And then if there's certain of these attributes, traits that you might struggle with or not be that good in, identify those and then ask for help. Obviously the management team, myself, anyone else that's experienced here, if you find one of these that you might not be as strong in, definitely reach out for help because there's going to be tools and tricks and all kinds of things that we can do to assist. And then also, I think one of the most powerful things is self study. I know a lot of this. I've received a lot of tools, a lot of help, a lot of assistance, but a lot of it is me just researching on my own. A lot of it is how do I get better in X, Y, and Z? How do I become a master communicator? How do I do these different things? And then looking at resources to get better. Because the guarantee here is that if you pick five things, if you pick five topics, five attributes, traits that you need to get better in, and you make that your focus in 2026 and get better in those things, it is 100% guaranteed that your performance, your production are going to improve because these things are so incredibly important. We'll go down them a little bit, but I, I can personally guarantee that if you really focus on some of these things and do some self-study or ask your manager, what are things that you think I can improve on? And then you focus on them, it is guaranteed you're going to get better and your production is going to get better this year. Um, so yeah, it's a couple things before we actually get into the actual um, sections that I put together is two personal philosophies that I have that has really driven everything I do, whether it's professionally, personally, um, anything like that. Is I have it written down on the agenda is the will versus do mindset, and basically that a lot of times people will talk about I am going to do this or I have a plan to do this, and that's not actually doing it. So I mean, it's always good to know what you need to do, to have a plan for what you're going to do, to say you're going to do it. It's a totally different thing to say I'm currently doing this. And getting into that mindset where you're doing something versus planning to do it is a very powerful transition. So my encouragement to everyone is, and myself too, is if you identify five things that you need to improve upon, don't wait till next week. Don't wait till 2 weeks from now, maybe sometime in the future. Do it like today. Do it over the weekend. Start taking the steps so you can say, I'm currently getting better at X, Y, and Z. These five things I've made initial steps to get better. And then, just keep being in that doing and mindset. And then the other personal philosophy that I have is what I call a belief versus habits. Which one is more important, the belief or the habit? And basically it's like everyone's told you need to do X, Y, and Z to be a better recruiter, to achieve your goals. You need to do this. These are the things you need to do. Well, you can do that for a little bit, but if those attributes and traits are not developed, those habits that you're trying to accomplish are going to fall at the wayside pretty quickly, because you can only will yourself for a certain amount of time. Where if you really, really focus on improving a lot of these attributes, traits, all of the habits just kind of come second nature. I think your habits become a lot easier once you have built up some of these attributes and traits. And I just think it fuels the habits once you have like personally developed, professionally, personally, things like that. So um, before we actually get into the like four, so my goal here is, to go through each, you know, uh, we have four different kind of sections on, the attributes and traits. And my goal is to maybe spend 10 minutes on each one and to stop at the end of each one and just kind of talk about it, see if there's any questions, see if the management team, anything that they would like to add to it. But before we get into that, does anyone have any thoughts, questions before we actually dive into the four sections? Okay, awesome. Well, let's get actually into the exact attributes and traits. So the first section that we have is interpersonal and team dynamics. And these traits focus on how an individual interacts with others and contributes to a collective environment. So the first, attribute that I have listed is collaborative and teamwork. Can you work well with others and be a good partner? Actively working with others towards a shared goal. I think the more collaborative you are, the more team focused you are, just the better you're going to be. Another one that we have on that list is communication. Do you clearly articulate feelings, actions, and processes? Um, are you clearly exchanging your thoughts and ideas? That was one that I had to, I know, like, I went through a ton of training prior to Curari and for sales. And we kind of had it forced down our throat in the previous industry I was in. And that was one that I was told that I had to get way better on. I was terrible at communicating. I was terrible at articulating thoughts. And that was one thing that was one of my five that I had to get a lot better on. And still to this day, even my wife will tell me I'm a terrible communicator. So I'm, that's one that I personally focus on. And that's one of my five that I wrote down that focusing on getting better on. Um, the other one on this list is, being forgiving and being kind. Realizing that no matter how long you do this, whether it's a year or 30 years, you're going to make mistakes and you're not going to be perfect. And so I think having that, forgiving mindset, I think is really important. Resolving conflicts and maintaining positive team morale. I think having a positive team morale, good team morale, I think is really important. Um, Another huge one that, in fact, Dave Whitty and I know Dave has mentioned this a lot this week, is being a listener and asking questions, not telling a candidate what they want to, not telling a candidate what they're going to do. But I think the important thing is being a master at asking questions, by listening, by knowing the right questions to ask, the right lead-in questions, the right follow-up questions, getting a candidate to start talking. Now, there's a difference between getting them to talk and getting them to ramble. you're, you're trying to eliminate the rambling, and you're trying to get them to give more information, to hit hot topics, there's certain things that the more information we know about them, there's the surface details that they'll give you, but then there's the underlying real details. And by asking the right questions, I think that in being a really good listener, rather than, okay, I'm not really listening to what you're saying because I have thoughts I need to get out, I have things I need to say, rather than listening. And then I think it's a trait, it's a learned quality to be able to ask right questions. I know I went through some sales training on it. This is one thing that I'm focused on trying to get better on, is learning how to ask better questions. Scenarios, situations, how do I ask better questions? How do I ask better leading questions? These questions are being answered. Where does that take it? And what other than follow-up questions can I ask to get to what I'm trying to get to? I'm trying to find out things about the candidate. What are they really looking for? Where do they really want to be? What's really important for them in their job search? What's really important to their family, to their children, to all these different things? And if I'm just calling them on the phone saying, hey, it's Jeremiah, let's talk about your search. Well, are they going to tell me about all that stuff? Probably not. But the more and more I get to know them, the more better questions I ask, the more lead-in questions I ask, the better follow-up questions I ask. And if I'm listening to what they're saying, the more information, real, usable, tangible information that I'm going to be able to get. And so that's, I think, a huge one for people, is to learn how to be a better listener, learn how to ask better questions, and then know how to take those questions and ask follow-up questions. So I think that's one I know I need to get better at, and I bet a bunch of us do. Um, Another one, like when I went through a lot of sales training, was called The Seven Steps to Every Sale, and it was from Jay Abraham, and awesome sales guy. And he does a reverse pyramid, which basically is, that his two big things are relationship, building rapport, relationship, same thing, and following up is the two biggest sales skills. And I think it is, even in our industry, especially with the, with AI and everything coming up that's becoming very automated. I think the thing that we have going for us is being able to be relationship driven, to be building relationships, to get our clients, like as I say here, they know you, they like you, and they trust you. If candidates know you, like you, and trust you, if clients know you, like you, and trust you, you're going to get further ahead. We do make easy placements where none of that has to happen because of the Curari machine, but a very large chunk of our placements do have to go based on, you know, just good relationships, especially relationships with clients. So I think being relationship focused and knowing how to build better relationships, I think are really important. The final thing in this section is being teachable. Are you open to learning new things about from people that know more than you? And although I've had some success and have been doing this for a while, there's a lot of people on this team that have been doing a lot better and know a lot more than I do. So I'm constantly listening to folks that have been doing this a lot longer than I. The two Daves, Jerry, Ian, others that have been doing this a lot longer than I have, and I'm constantly listening, constantly wanting to know, how do I get better at doing this, and being willing to be teachable and knowing that I don't have this all figured out. Um, so that's that first section of interpersonal and team dynamics. Does anyone have any questions in that section, or management team, you guys want to add anything to any of these
I was just going to
attributes and
say
traits
that
listed under the section?
even though everybody's kind of working for themselves here, the team is important because what comes around goes around here. You put a good job in, somebody fills that job. Somebody else puts a good job in, maybe you fill that job. Client calls you about something, there is a lot of work where you help put something valuable in, somebody else puts something, there's a lot of back and forth, so when you're going about your day, if you put good effort into good job notes or good candidate notes, you know, that's going to help you. It's going to help somebody else. And somebody else doing that is going to come around and help you also. So there is a team environment, a very strong teamwork that is part of this. And then I was also going to say, with listening and building relationships, it's been shown that if you get somebody talking, even if you don't say hardly anything, the more they talk to you, the more positive they view you. They'll think you're smarter. They'll think you know more. You don't have to say anything a lot of times. And their personal impression of you is going to be much higher just by getting them to talk, even if you don't tell them anything about, not anything of value, but if you don't tell them a whole lot, you don't do the talking, let them do the talking and they'll trust you more.
Dave, it's funny, one of the quotes I've heard, I don't know who said it, but I heard it a long time ago, is the quote was, the most interesting people in the world are the ones that are most interested. Yeah, and like it goes to your point, if you're asking them a bunch of questions and are a really good listener, people I think automatically think you're an interesting person, by uh, focusing on them. I mean, people want to talk about themselves. Doctors want to talk about themselves, and so you to have a listening ear, I think, is really important. And I think the other key there too is being able to control the conversation a little bit. Like, you can be a great listener, they can be talking a ton, but you still have to be able to maneuver the conversation so it's not going down a path where they start talking about their cats or their coffee or whatever. So I think the ability to just keep them on track to the stuff that we need to hear, um, and not getting them. There's some just general gray area stuff that we're just trying to find common ground on, but ideally we want to get them talking about their job search and whatever.
I'd like
So
to add just
um,
something here, and I do just got to say, Jeremiah, what you got against cats and coffee, man? Come on. I mean, those. I'm not a cat person, but anywho, no. What I was going to say, there's tons of attributes here, and I think you could look at a list like this, and frankly, feel like maybe it's a little overwhelming. There's a lot of things to focus on here, and I would agree that if you're going to really be good at this job, you've got to be a pretty dynamic individual. That being said, I think, from my perspective. Um, if I had to pick some of the most important ones here, and these could change a little bit from person to person, but I would probably put being a problem solver at or near the top. That's just something that the better you can get at creating a solution when you're faced with an obstacle, the more successful you will be in this job. And part of that requires experience, right? For every failure, we're hopefully learning something from that. But I think what Jeremiah, you were touching on earlier, is how can you shorten that time it takes to become what we might say an expert problem solver, or an expert maybe in any of these areas in relation to Curari, is lean on people who've been doing it longer, lean on management, lean on your leaders, right? Come to us when you've got a problem and let us help you solve it, right? So just remember, what Vanilla Ice always said. That's all I got.
I'm dying to. Did he have more than one song? Because I'm just playing that
Well,
one song in my
when you
head,
got
and
a
I'm trying to
problem, I'll solve it.
all
Check out the beat.
Oh,
My
If you
I
brother
thought
got
it
a
was
solves
problem,
it.
he'll
collaborate and
solve it.
or if we're going to listening, it's stop,
I
collaborate, and
mean, the
listen,
dude was
right?
a savant.
That's what I
I
said.
mean, we maybe just didn't realize it until just now. We've really figured out he's could be a motivational speaker now. Sorry, we're getting way off track. Go ahead, Jeremiah.
No worries. No, on a Vanilla Ice subject, the last year the Vikings do this thing called a winter whiteout, where they, the whole fan dresses in white and they embrace the Minnesota cold thing up here. And, this year they had Snoop Dogg for the Christmas. It was awesome. It was awesome. Well, last year for the Thanksgiving game, they had a whiteout, or no, it was like December, they had a whiteout game. And I was up there with a buddy, and all of a sudden I found out at the game, Vanilla Ice was performing at halftime. So I was like texting my family. I'm like, you'll never guess who's going to be here at halftime. You'll never guess who's going to be performing. And they're like, who? And I told them, they're like, who's that? And I'm like, you don't know Ice Ice Baby? You don't know? And they were like so unimpressed with Vanilla Ice. So he doesn't, I think, translate as well as Snoop does, but I enjoyed it at least. But all right, let's get into the next section. It's operational execution and reliability. These traits describe the ability to manage tasks effectively and consistently, delivering results. A lot of these are just pretty self-explanatory. Being accountable. Do you accept responsibility for your actions? Taking ownership of actions and outcomes. This one I think is a really, really important one. The next one is consistency. I think, like I know I've been talking to Dave about this a lot, but when, we, like, some of us will have, we have our goals. We have our monthly goals, our weekly goals, yearly goals. But I think a lot of us will have good days. A lot of us will have not such good days. I think the key, I know for me, has been being consistent every single day. Having a good, having it a rarity if I have a down day. Having a rarity where the work isn't, what it should be. A rarity where goals aren't being hit. It's that consistent week in, week out, day in, day out, phone times, name clearing emails, send outs. They're going to fluctuate a little bit where they're not always going to be the same. But if if I have a year end goal and I'm like, I want to make X amount of placements this month, end of the year, I want this dollar at the end of the year. I know my pathway to that is having consistent results, being the same guy, pretty much the same day over and over and over and over again, with the rare down day. I don't have to be great every day, but if I'm good every day, above average to good every day, and I'm that way for at least 4 out of 5 days in a week, just by the process and by following the process and allowing the process work for me, it's almost impossible to not hit my overall big goals and the even bigger reaching goals. So I really firmly believe getting in, doing whatever you can do in your personal life to allow consistency to get into your professional life, I think is massively important. Because I think, like, you can be super excited about a great day, but if you follow that up with three stinkers, you're going to look at the overall week being just average to below average. Where if you have slightly above average days and you do that the majority of the days, you're going to come way out ahead than having like one or two monster days a month type of thing. So I believe consistency is really, really important. Dependability, can others count on you? Do you do what you say you're going to do? I think being disciplined kind of goes along with being consistent. I think if you're super disciplined at this job and you just have a disciplined mindset, I think you're consistent. I think those two kind of go hand in hand. Um, this next one I think is like probably even more important than consistency. And I know the management team talks about this a lot. I know that they all are 100% on board with this, is the following through and being relentless. If you are a master at following up, if you are consistent following up and you're doing that 3 follow-up technique, contact, follow up, takeaway, at every step of the process, contact, follow up, takeaway, and you're consistently following through and you're being relentless on your follow ups and following up under every single step in the process, um, you are going to be just that alone. If you took nothing else from this roundtable, if you find out how to be a master at following up and you're consistently following up in every single process, whether it's clients, candidates, you name it, following up and like I follow up with, I use this technique and with contractors and just in my personal life. I'll follow up, with my spouse and my children and like, hey, if I've left takeaways for my spouse, left takeaways for my children. It works. And by using the follow-up system that I know the management team has trained all of us to do, um, if you do it and then are consistent with it, that alone, if on the front end you're having enough activity doing name clearing emails, um, which name clearing emails without the follow up are going to result in less send outs. Name clearing emails with a great follow up system are going to result in more send outs, which then, if you then follow that through, is going to lead to more interviews, more placements, so on and so forth. You could take nothing away from this roundtable. If you take away that you have to be great at following up, if you don't feel like you're good at following up, then be great at following up. That alone will make your 2026 better than 2025, guaranteed. So if you don't feel like you're good at doing that, if you don't think you're an expert at doing that, do it. Reach out to the management team, myself, learn how to be great at doing it and take it serious, because that is massive. Um, Next on the list, integrity. Um, I have down here, are you the same person when someone is watching you and when no one is watching you? In recruiting, sometimes we have to skate that fine line, that little gray area. But I found that you can have integrity, you can be honest, you can be have good ethics, and still skate that gray area all at the same time. Are you really good at multitasking? That's a trait that I feel like has helped me a lot, but that was one I had to learn. I had to go through a lot of training in order to learn how can I do a lot of things at the same time and be able to get a lot of stuff done by maybe not focused on one thing, but maybe being able. There's a lot of. I'm not going to go through all the examples, but if you can find out how to do more stuff in the same time by being a great multitasker, that's another thing that can definitely help you. Um, Process management, having I think this is what, I won't talk about this too much because I think this is a lot of what Dave's going to talk about with goal setting next week, is do you have a plan and continually access, test, and develop your processes? Um, you know, it, One of the steps in goal setting, and like I said, I'll let Dave really get into this next week, is proper goal setting. You have to have plans, but then you have to be able to execute those plans. And so, are you really good at those processes? Um, and time management and multitasking, they kind of go hand in hand, but well, I guess not. One thing I know that I do that really helps is I have a schedule every day. I have a checklist every day. I'm looking at my checklist right now. That allows me to stay on task. It allows me to stay focused. It allows me to know exactly what I need to get done at the end of the day. And I pretty much work the same schedule. And I got people who depend on me. My wife needs me done at a certain time. I've got things I got to do. My kids need me. So by having that schedule, by being really good at time management, I can get all the things done. I can check off all the boxes, and I work really, really hard to make sure all those boxes are checked off, because I don't want to leave at the end of the day and have any tasks that need to get done that could have been done that aren't done. So I think time management is a huge thing And then I don't really necessarily know, maybe some of the other team has a good way to train on this, but the final thing is work ethic. How hard of a worker are you? And that doesn't mean volume of time. You can have awesome, great work ethic and work 8 hours a day. You don't have to work 12 hours a day. It's all about being super efficient, putting your nose to the grind, not having a lot of external distractions, and just busting it out. um, so that I think having that really strong work ethic, I think obviously is a massive key too. So before we get into the next section, any comments, questions, management team, you guys have anything you want to add to any of those, attributes, traits?
I'll throw something out there. I think you've mentioned a few things in here, kind of consistency, discipline, follow through, work ethic. I think there's a lot of those that all are very hand in hand. And I think from my perspective, people talk a lot about motivation. And you need motivation to do this, you need motivation to do that. I know that isn't on here, but I would remind everybody that there are going to be days where maybe you're just not feeling it as much as other days. That's just gonna happen, right? Life gets in the way, things come up. And I think that's really where discipline comes in this job in particular. Knowing that you just have to stick with the process. You have to fight through that sometimes to make sure that you're staying on track, right? And I think that's just something everyone should keep in mind here. There's going to be good days, there's going to be not so good days, but if you stick with the process, work your plan your work, you're going to end up where you need to be at the end of the week, at the end of the month, wherever it is. Okay, so don't get discouraged when things aren't going your way. Just know that that's part of it. And if you're not feeling super motivated, just know, hey, that doesn't really matter. I still have to get this done and make sure it happens. And the one thing I also wanted to mention here, you guys, is that in terms of integrity, every single person at this company already has that in spades. You wouldn't be a part of Curari if we didn't believe in you and your ability to be, a good person, a kind person, work within this kind of good faith industry that we really have, where we really just have to count on each other. So just really appreciate all of you for that, and I'll let you keep going, Jeremiah.
Okay.
I'm going to piggyback on Ian there too about the motivation versus discipline. Discipline is what gets you by in this business, in this industry. We have to dig through a lot of junk to get to the nuggets of gold at the end of the rainbow sometimes. Last year we entered almost 40,000 individual leads, like individual candidates. Some of them were retreads from the year before, but there was 40,000 people that clicked on to one of our jobs or responded to one of our ads, and we placed 313 of them. How do you think that happens? That doesn't happen by motivation alone, because if I was motivated to dig through that much stuff, oh man, I'd lose it really quick. It's a discipline that gets you through when you're doing that work. That is the follow-up of calling people 1, 2, 3 days in a row, and then consistently leaving that takeaway that will then be effective because you did make those 3 discipline calls on the way there. So that's why I really encourage everybody to work on as much as possible, is just staying consistent, staying disciplined, and just putting in the motions every day, because the more motions you put in, the more you have on your plate at this job, the better things will happen. And that's all about having the discipline to do it.
Cool. Thanks, Ian and Jerry. All right, we've got about 20 minutes left, so I'm going to jump right back into the next section. The next one is growth mindset and strategic thinking. These characteristic traits involve how a person thinks, plans for the future, and handles change. I won't spend a lot of time on a lot of these. There's a few that I see that are, important, but or they're all important, but some that I want to touch on. Being adaptive. Can you adjust to your surroundings? We're in an industry of change. Things are changing like daily. And, there's stuff that we have to, whether it's clients, things internally within, Curari. There's so much stuff that I did 12 years ago that's different now that, like, geez, if I would have just only done it and been hard headed and say, I'm only doing it this way, I wouldn't be here. So I've had to change, adapt, do a lot of different stuff because our industry is just constantly changing. Um, Being creative. I know this is something that Jerry talked about, and I'll maybe let him at the end of the section comment on this. I won't spend a lot of time because I know Jerry's got some great thoughts on this. Is be creative. Are you thinking outside the box and looking for non-traditional solutions? I think you have to be ultra creative. If you're just like pushing paper and taking job, just if you're just you have to be creative in this industry. And I think the more creative you are, the more outside the box thinking you're doing, the better you're going to be. I think it is, the next one is having an entrepreneurial spirit. I think I've heard Jerry talk about this a lot at, thinking of this as your own personal business, your own small business. And, ultimately, even though you have tons of help, tons of support, you are going to get out of it what you put into it, which is, pretty much any business owner. Being proactive. You can't wait in this industry. If you wait for just leads only, hey, they hit on this job, I'm going to send this candidate to this place. Are you going to get some placements? Yes. If you want to hit goals, really start making some serious money and making a lot of placements, you've got to be proactive. You have to go out and get it. You can't wait for it to come to you. I think it kind of goes with being creative, and I think Jerry can speak on this as the problem solving. Do you give up easily when issues come up, or do you look for creative solutions? I think those two kind of go hand in hand. Being tech savvy and typing. You don't have to be great at it, but I think the better you are at technology, I think the better you are at typing, the better you are at being able to just do anything, with computers. I think the better you're going to be. So I know there's a lot of, I'm always kind of looking at, for me, it's like looking at shortcuts in word processing, spreadsheets. Just how do I get better at that? To cut down on time to be more efficient and more effective. Because I think the more tech savvy I am, the more I understand about technology, and quicker typer I am, the more I can get done in the less amount of time. And embracing certain AI platforms. Maybe not all of them, but there's certain things that I have used AI for that's helped me a lot. That has saved time. That's allowed me to be more efficient and effective. And then the last one in the section is being well traveled. My parents were divorced when I was 3, and my dad left the state of Minnesota. And so until I was 18, I lived in it was just in the summertime. I visited him in the summertime, but I think I lived in 10 different places. And I've traveled a lot. I think there's only been a few states I've never been to. So that helps me a ton in this. So much of our business is geography driven, and knowing communities, knowing distances from places. And I think the relational aspect of talking to candidates, clients about, oh yeah, you are looking here, Fayetteville, North Carolina, just one that popped to my head. Oh yeah, my wife's best friend's husband was in the military in Fayetteville, and so I have this knowledge or this information about Fayetteville. Allows me to relate, allows me to know. With clients, it's certain clients, if they're in certain areas and I know a lot about their community, that helps. But I think there's so many examples I could give on being well traveled. It's cool because whenever I go somewhere, I'll usually go somewhere and oh, we've got a client there. We've got a client there, and sometimes I'll try to send an email out and be like, hey, do you mind if I drop in and say hello? Or at least be able to drive by the hospital and be like, oh, that's where it's located, because I can tell a candidate oh yeah, I was just in that community, last week. I drove by the hospital, and it just allows you to have a little bit of common ground. So I think being well traveled, or at the bare minimum, being really well versed in geography, I think is a really important thing here. So yeah, I don't know, Jerry, do you want to add anything to the creative problem solving part? I know that's one thing that you've talked about quite a bit.
I was just going to mention, Jeremiah, that you're doing such a good job right now and the time constraints that we're running against. I'll kind of wait till the questionnaire type area of the presentation, see if I could jump in and answer any specific questions. I will say that I'm a big proponent of the ABC, always be creating. And that could be as simple as creating a challenge for yourself on a daily basis. That challenge could be to get through all your follow-up calls. That challenge could be to shoot off a bonus addendum to one of your clients. That challenge, it could be really anything. It could just be making your bed on a daily basis, or starting up some other sort of hobby or habit that kind of sparks your discipline that we're talking about. That could be working out. It could be eating healthy, whatever it might be. Always be creating for yourself and creating opportunities for yourself to do things that are awesome. And I'll leave it at that.
Well, cool. Thanks, Jerry. I'll jump into this last one, and then we'll kind of close it up with questions or any comments that people would like, and we'll just kind of go from there. Last section is drive, persuasion, and influence. These traits represent personal conviction and the mental strength required to overcome challenges. The first one I have is belief and optimism. When you're there's been a lot of things, and I think that's something that can be learned. Are you optimistic or pessimistic? There's a lot of stuff in my life that I can be super optimistic about, and there's a lot that I can be pessimistic about, and that's the pessimistic side where it's like that is changing in mindset, where I'm like, I need to change my mindset on these different things and not be so pessimistic about these things. And I think it's a learned thing. I think it is a changing of my mindset to be less pessimistic about certain things. And I just, one of the common traits I've seen in a lot of high producers is having a positive outlook, being optimist. You have to be a realist about certain things, but being very optimistic about things and having that belief that you're going to do it rather than like having a pessimistic attitude. And I think that is a behavior that can be changed. It's a learned behavior that you can change to be a more optimistic person. And there's a lot of things outside of work and a lot of different areas that you can involve in your life to have more optimism just in general. So I would really encourage everyone, because I think no matter how optimistic of a person you are, you can be more optimistic. And I know I'm constantly working on removing more pessimism out of my life and looking more for the silver lining in things. Next one is closing, being a closer. I think, I won't get into that much, but there are tons and tons and tons and tons of sales books on, becoming a better closer, and how to close things down. And I won't cover any of that. I think that's, kind of speaks for itself, but in my opinion, there's a right way to close things and there's a wrong way to close things. But I think it's, there's just a lot of resources out there on how to get better. And I think that's probably where, to know the Curari way, to do what's best for our industry, to what's best for Curari, that's where you lean on the managers to get, to really understand how to be better at closing things, to improve your closing percentages from interview to, to placement. So definitely lean on the managers for that one. Being competitive. And that's not just, a lot of times people look at competitiveness with winning, but I think I look at that more as being the best version of yourself. I'm not really competitive with anyone. I'm competitive with myself. What I'm worried about is being the best version of myself. It's like, how do I make 2026 business-wise better than 2025? How do I become a better dad in 2026 than I was 2025? How do I become a better husband 2026 and 2025? It's a competition within myself to be the best version of myself. And it's something that drives me very strongly, is to be constantly trying to be a better version. Next one is to be fearless and rejection resistant. This is one thing when I was interviewing, I remember distinctly Jerry, when he was interviewing me, he was asking me for my previous industry what my closing rate was, and I was like 50% or something. He laughed and he's like, well, you're going to be really successful here if your closing rate's like 1%. And I was like, oh, okay. Can I handle no? Can I handle rejection? You get a lot more no's and rejections in this business, and you got to be pretty darn fearless, and you've got to be able to handle that rejection really well. The better you can not take it personally and let it just slide off your back, not let your highs get too high, your lows get too low, I think is another thing that, I had to improve on, still am to this day. But, that's one thing that's definitely helped me. Being focused. This is one, personal thing for 2026, just in life, that I'm really focused on this year, is being focused, removing outside distractions, not doing more stuff, doing less stuff, less social media, less outside, what are the things that I need to be focused on? What are the things that are most important? And when I'm working, what distractions do I have that need to be eliminated so I can be more focused and more, productive in my work? Reducing distractions and being focused is important. Um, I won't touch on this much at all because Dave's going to cover this next week. Goal driven. Um, Identifying, like you have goals that are set for you, but then you're also going to have personal goals. You may like, all right, this is your goal from your manager, but what do you personally want to, what do you want? Above and beyond that, what's your big goal? What's your big audacious hairy goal that you've got? And and so identifying what they are and then going out and doing it, and how and having that mindset where not only do you have this goal, but you're going to do it. So I'll let Dave, focus on that next week. This kind of gets back into what Ian was saying, motivation. And one thing that I have written down here is, so an analogy I would give is like there's people talk about happiness a lot. And kind of like what Jerry was saying, I think it was Jerry or Ian, one of the two was saying, you're not going to be motivated every day. You're going to have days where you're feeling great, days where you're ready to roll out of bed, and other days you're like, oh my gosh, I just want to go back to sleep. And like I look at like happiness versus joy. Happiness is something that you can't be happy all the time. You have times where you can, have good days, bad days, things in your life that happen where you can be really happy about. Other times where it's like, this sucks. And you're not going to be happy all the time, but you can be joyful all the time. I'm a firm believer that you can have joy in your life 24/7, but not necessarily have, the happiness is going to come in waves. Well, that's where I kind of look at motivation, because your motivation is going to be waving a little bit. It's going to be wavering. It's not always going to be high. But there's something else I think that is more important than motivation. It's how driven you are. There's a self-drive that goes in with goals, achieving goals. But if you have something, like what drives you, why do you have these goals set? What is making you get out of bed? What I've written down, what makes you get out of bed in the morning? For me, it's providing for my family. It's giving my family a great life. That's what gets me out of bed. And like, if it were just me, I probably wouldn't work as hard. But I've got people I need to take care of. My butt needs to get out of bed. It needs to work. That fuels motivation, but that drive is constant. That drive changes everything I do. It rules the day. And it kind of forces me to be more motivated because I have an internal drive, certain things that I want to accomplish. So it's like, what is it that you're wanting out of life? What is it that you're wanting out of this job? What drives you to get out of bed in the morning? And of course, going back to being optimistic, be optimistic about that. What is the positive things that you want? And then let that drive you. Let that drive your motivation, knowing that your motivation is going to wave a little bit, but the drive should not. Passion, having passion. Do you have strong feelings for what you do? Here it's an intense interest and energy for one's field of work. It kind of goes along with drive and motivation. Persistence, resilience, tenacity. It goes back into, it goes into the fearless, rejection resistant. You have to be persistent and resilient and tenacious. Persuasion, there's like, towards the end, sometimes you've got to tell docs what they need to do. At times, you've got to help hold their hand and get them to the finish line, and you've got to, without telling them what they need to do, there is a persuasion factor to recruiting where you're kind of getting them to get done what they need to get done without necessarily telling them what they need to do. If that makes sense. There's a persuasion to our job and getting a result that you're, looking to get, that, and having influence over other people's decisions. And I think that's a big part. And then the last one is, writing skills. Can you articulate your thoughts into words that present well? I think it's a big one. I think it's something where I think if we write something via AI, I think you can see it a mile away. I'm a pretty big believer on writing it in your own words. It doesn't have to be perfect, but I think still having better, skills to articulate thoughts into words that are in your own words, I think are pretty important. So that's, kind of what I have today. Before I kind of open it up to everyone else, like I said, this is, like Ian said, this is a really long list. It would feel very overwhelming to, to try to focus on all this. My encouragement to everyone is look at this list, find 5 things that you feel like you can get better at, and then, through, reaching out to us, uh, self-study, whatever it may be, find ways to get better at 5 things that you feel like that you would like to focus on. Because, like I said in the beginning, uh, even if it's the following up that I really hammered home, but if you focus on 5 things and get better at 5 things, whether they're small improvements or big improvements, the end result is you will get better, you will have better production, and your 2026 will be better than your 2025. So, um, yeah, I'll open the floor for any questions or any comments or any management inclusion that they would like to have. Yes, Ian,
I got
please.
something here in particular in this last section, drive, persuasion, and influence. I feel like this is really where, you want your skills really sharp. These are all things that are skills that you can improve on. These are not things that you're just, born with in terms of being a great closer or anything like that. But many of these, when I look at being a closer, being fearless, not worried about rejection, being passionate, persistent, resilient, tenacious, persuasive. Okay. All of those things in my mind are very much related to something that we want you all to be doing every day, likely many times a day, which is some version of a takeaway message. Okay. What I know about this job is that you have to play to win. Excuse the sports analogy here. Okay. But I'm just so stoked for the Hoosiers. I can barely, stand still, right? And I'm about to vibrate away from this computer. But, what you have to remember is that if you are playing defense, right, if you're trying to make sure a deal doesn't die, you likely aren't taking the actions that you would need to otherwise to push it forward. Right. Now, we could put that on one side of the bell curve and say, you know what? I'm not worried about, upsetting the boat. I'll tip the whole boat over and dump everybody out if that's what it takes to get what I need. Okay. And while that might sound like an extreme analogy, the point here is that you have to be prepared to provoke a response if you don't get one. You have to be prepared to have this type of persistence and perseverance and this tenaciousness where you will not be told no until it is 6 feet under. It's not dead. Okay. So just remember, push in a responsible way. This is not me saying be a jerk. It's not me saying to use foul language at all, right? It's me saying be smart and pick your spots and understand that there are going to be times when confrontation will be required and you have to say things or maybe send the message that they might not appreciate that much. And that's okay. That's part of your job here, is to make sure that you're being honest about what's going on. And that's really what these takeaway messages and all this stuff boils down to, is you're telling people the truth and they don't like hearing it. Okay. So just remember, really stick to this. When in doubt, leave a takeaway and things are going to happen. And if they don't, that's your answer anyways, and you can move on. But if you take anything away from what I'm saying today, takeaways early and often. Do not be intimidated to go in there and pull the plug on anything that isn't going your way. Create a consequence for inaction. Thanks, Jeremiah.
Hoorah. Hoorah. Yeah, Ian, those are great words. And I'm gonna piggyback on the flip side of that, and not wanting to know the truth. You're telling them truths that they don't want to hear. The flip side is finding out truths we don't want to hear, right? And I've been doing this a long time, seeing a lot of folks be really successful in this job, seeing a lot of folks crash and burn. And I think one of the common traits that the people in the ladder pool have is that they're afraid of this. And a lot of times they're afraid of this because they don't have enough volume to fall back on. They're relying on this one deal to go through to get them through their quarter, to get them to their quarter goal. And so they don't want to hear the hard truth by asking the questions or saying the statements that are necessary to find out if their true answer is no. And that's really what we're trying to do here, is get them to say no. And when they don't say no, we know that that's a green light to keep pushing until when, Ian? When did you say we stop?
Not
When we're
until it's
6 feet under is what
six
Ian
feet
said.
under, or we've reached
That's right.
the
That's
mountaintop,
right.
right? Either way, we're
Yep.
going up or we're going down, and you're the
Preach it to
one
me.
who
Preach
is
it to
the
me.
captain of their search
Yes.
ship. Let's go. Ugh.
Yes, yes, that's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. And we don't quit until then. That's why we say if there's an interview and they leave that interview and there's a 1% chance that they might take that job, you're telling me there's a chance? It's money board. And then we try to drive a plan that'll make that happen. Lots of times that plan is if it's 1%, we just say, hey, you're not interested, right? And they confirm and we move on. But lots of times, many times others, that's not how it ends up. That's not how the story plays out. But again, I'm going back to paragraph 1 here, communication. It's hard to communicate sometimes your true feelings that we all know inside if you're relying on this thing tooth and nail. You need to build up your defenses
A lot
by
of that
having
comes from
diversity in
getting
both your client
optimistic that
stable,
what
your
you're doing
candidate
is going to
stable.
have a good
Get more
result.
things going so you could speak more freely from your heart and force things to happen that you might otherwise be afraid of hearing. Hoorah, Ian. Go Hoosiers.
I wanted to add something. Yeah. Yeah, I
Optimism is
think
huge in this job. Yeah. Go ahead,
that's kind of
Ashley. Sorry.
where I was going to. I think you can hear me. So I want to say that I think most of us here know, but our brains are so amazing in the way that there are little teeny tiny things that we can do every single day that don't take a lot. You don't even have to leave your bed to do it. And that is, and I know some people say that this is what the kids would call buns, but it actually really works. And if you don't already do something like this, I would really challenge you to start. And that is every single day, at the very least, when you get up in the morning and then before you go to bed at night, remind yourself of these positive things that you're looking for yourself. So, hey, I'm a great closer. I'm good at handling rejection. All of these different things. I'm going to have a great day. I love what I do. All of these things, the more that you do that, you actually are programming your brain to believe that, and then it will find those things for you. So I know again that some people think that that's hocus pocus, or they feel silly doing it. Do it anyway. Try it out if you never have. I'd say do that consistently for even a week. And then journaling's huge too. Even if it's a quick recap with yourself at night where you're not writing it down, but just take inventory of your day. How did I do today? How do I feel? And then end of week stuff too. Hey, had a great week. What's next week look like, right? Whether that's your work and the way you're setting that up, but also how you feel about yourself. And my biggest thing, and I tell my daughter this all the time, treat yourself nicely and do good, feel good, right? So the better that you do, the better you're going to feel. Yeah, be nice to yourself. Start there. It makes everything else so much easier.
Thank you.
Peter said he's having a tall day.
Well, cool. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to add or include
Just
in
have to
the?
say, Jeremiah, you're
Did you see the group chat, Jeremiah?
I did not. I pull it up right now.
What's that say?
Which one? What you said or
The bottom one.
today?
Yeah.
Oh, I
I'm
said
having
I'm
a
having a
tall.
tall day today. I was going off
Oh
of
no. The one before that I said, Jeremiah. Darn it.
Good,
My
better,
last one.
best. Good, better, best. Never let it rest till your good gets better and your better gets best. I like
Yeah,
that.
buddy. I just got you to
Nice.
say the Bears mantra for the weekend, brother. Yes. How's that feel? Whoa!
Oh,
That was
gosh.
cruel.
No, seriously,
That
but I
was
feel
cruel.
that applies to Curari. I say it a lot. We have goals that we're all trying to hit here, and our goals are huge this year. We're looking for 356 company-wide placements, even counting on the newest 4 people that are all here. Welcome to Curari, newest 4 people: Crystal, Haley, Oh my goodness. Robert and somebody help me out with the last one. Help me, Logan. Come on,
Kelsey.
somebody.
Kelsey's
I
in
can't.
there. Kelsey's in there.
Kelsey, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry. But
We've
welcome
got
to
so many
Curari, you
pages
guys.
now.
I know we
Welcome,
have so many
everyone.
people now. It's great having you. And we're counting on everybody here to hit their goals on a quarterly basis, on a yearly basis. We'd love to see everybody exceed their goals. That's where the wealth really starts getting built here at Curari, when you start exceeding these goals and start growing year after year after year. Lots of you have come in with a huge financial base to 2026. Congratulations. Build on that. Don't let this opportunity pass you by. And that's where the good, better, best comes in. Sometimes at Curari, in this business, I've seen it happen a lot, you could get ahead of the game. And then you think you're at the better to best phase when you're still at the good to better phase. So I urge you guys to continue to just keep pushing forward, good, better, best, until our better gets better, or until our good gets better and our better gets best. And you guys are all exceeding your goals and really banking on some really good finances and helping out a lot of small communities this year. So thanks a lot, Jeremiah. Great session. Ian, awesome session as well. Thanks, everybody. Nice seeing everybody on a Friday, too. And I just want to say before we bump out of here, we're going to close the office today at 3:30. The only special occasion is that, like Ian said, it's electric here. We're electrified right now. We just can barely stand still in our seats, and we need to find some way to burn off some energy other than doing this work. So we're going to close the office about 3:30 today. You guys could all ride the Hoosier coattails. We're accepting bandwagon fans all weekend. If the Hoosiers win, don't expect the managers to be back on until at least like even the next day. We might not even be here. So wish us all luck, and thanks for everything you guys do.
Awesome.
Well said, Jerry. Well
Thanks very
said.
much.
Thanks,
Thanks,
guys.
Jerry.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremiah.
Thank